Welcome to the Empowered Birth series, where I go deep into everything that you need to know to plan and get your empowered, true, natural birth. And today's topic is all about the 3 types of people that have absolutely no business telling you anything about how you should give birth or have any opinions about your birth plans, your pregnancy plans. They have absolutely no say. Now, I'm going to also preface this by saying you are your own best expert, and technically, nobody gets to tell you what to do during your birth. However, sometimes you want to call in those experts or people who have had an experience of giving birth to be able to have a little bit more of a guide map. That being said, there are some people who claim to be experts or those who have had an experience of birth, and they can be really, really opinionated. This then leads to what I call the natural birth traps, which are all of the things that undermine your confidence, sabotage your natural process, and basically perpetuate the idea that your body is broken and defective, that you can't birth without medical intervention, that you aren't going to be able to handle the pain, that something's going to go wrong, and every other little fear trap that you can fall into that causes you to doubt yourself. Now, I also want to let you know that true natural birth is a physiological process. Your body is going to do it, whether you go and get any books, whether you take any classes, whether you hire a care provider, whether that care provider is there for you during your birth, whether you even take any classes on coping methods for birth, whether you prepare your body in advance by eating certain foods, whether you're going to do any exercises, your body will birth. The thing that you need to understand, though, is that in maybe 10 to 15% of the cases of natural birth, where something does need to be supported or you need a little bit of intervention, that is basically, you call that in. You don't automatically assume that your body is broken. Unfortunately, our birth culture and medical system perpetuates the opposite of what World Health Organization has said is the optimal rate of intervention, which is again 10 to 15%. And sometimes it can be as little as 5%. But if you go under that, if you don't have any intervention in birth ever, yeah, things are going to go wrong. But if you have too much intervention and you say, we're just going to control the medical process because things go wrong, that's also not good. If you want to learn more about this, I highly suggest checking out Rachel Reed's book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage. It goes into a deep dive of physiological birth, and it also tells you about how we got into this mess. You can also get a shorter version of this by going to my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide, and reading the ultimate guide to true natural birth. I lay it out for you. I tell you about true natural birth, what it really is, why it's not really what the natural birth tips are going to help you achieve, because unfortunately, a lot of those natural birth tips are perpetuating the natural birth traps. I talk about this inside my book, Your Empowered Birth, which is available on Amazon for purchase. Or you can just go into my playlist on YouTube, go to the Empowered Birth book playlist, and you can listen to the whole thing. But basically, what you need to understand is this. The Empowered Birth method is all about letting you take your power back in your birth experience. So you have a more confident and empowering pregnancy where you are following your own instincts. You are asking for things within the medical system that you actually want. You are not just going for every single test. If something doesn't feel right for you, you confidently can say no to that, and you can follow your body's unique process, and you can have a beautiful and transformative true natural birth experience, or as close to it as you feel that you can get based on your own intuition. If you do call in medical intervention, it's because your intuition told you that something wasn't quite right and you called that in You did not just follow the typical plan of the medical system with the cascade of interventions leading to the C-section. You'll know exactly why you got it, why you chose it, and you'll feel good about it, no matter what happened in your birth. Because it's not just about having a true natural birth. We're really striving for an empowered birth, one where you get to make all of the decisions. You are your own best expert. And unfortunately, the three types of people that I'm going to be talking about today are the ones that are undermining that confidence. So why is this important? Well, if you follow my 5 pillars of empowered birth, which I again go deeper with inside your empowered birth and the empowered birth method, you need to have the right mindset, the right education, the right environment, the right facilitators, and the right support. And within the categories of the right facilitators and right support is where you need to be watching out for these types of people, because they can sabotage your right mindset. They get into your head. They tell you different fears. What if this happens? What if this happens? You don't know everything. And then you start to doubt yourself. They might give you the wrong information, which then leads to you having the wrong education for true natural birth and what you really need to be looking at. They can also push you into the wrong environment, and then that leads to you not feeling safe in your birth. They can push you to hiring the wrong care providers or the wrong doula for you. They can end up having you listening to experts that aren't actually going to support your true natural birth. And they may even perpetuate the same cultural dynamic within your family, within the mom groups, and even with your partner that leads to you, again, doubting yourself and not having that right mindset dialed in. Part of the empowered birth method is really focusing on the 3-step process once you have those 5 pillars optimized to be able to get past your fear and have that right mindset, and then call in that right support, which then allows you to advocate with your right facilitators. So you need to understand that if you have these 3 types of people in your ear talking to you, they can end up causing you all of that fear and anxiety and have you doubting yourself and doubting your abilities. And these people are everywhere. They are in the medical system. They are in the mom groups. They are out on the street and you just run into them. They are in your family dynamic. They are in your friends. They're everywhere, even in our media. If you are consuming things on social media, you can run into these types of people. So I want you to be very aware of what to look for so that you don't fall into what I call the information loop or information overwhelm, and you don't start doubting yourself. You don't fall into the fear traps, which then leads to you ending up making a decision out of fear instead of from a place of empowerment. So all of my tricks and all of my tools within the empowered birth method are to help you tune back into yourself so you can aim for a true natural birth and pull back only as needed and only what your own intuition tells you is right, instead of following the typical mainstream advice where people say they know how natural birth works, but they don't know your body, they don't know your values, they don't know how you feel safest, they don't know the words that help you feel safest, and they can't support you properly. In fact, even when I'm working at the highest level with my clients, every single one that comes to me, these moms usually have different things within their family dynamic that we're working through, or different things with their care providers. They have different partners, they have different backgrounds, they have different traumatic birth stories that they're working through. And I'm able to help them get through that within the empowered birth method, but it's custom tailored to them. And one of the things about the empowered birth method is that it is so versatile that all you have to do is apply it to your own situation. If you do need some support on that, that is available for you through my 3 paths of the empowered birth method. You can again go learn more about that at empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide. But before you jump off and go and check that out, because you can go at the end, inside of the description of this video, there's also a link to the start guide, so you can go there. Before we get into that, let's get into those 3 types of people. Okay, so number 1 that you want to watch out for is anybody who has never given birth before. If somebody has an opinion about birth and has never given birth before, you don't want to listen to that, because we have grown up in a culture of fear and mistrust of our bodies. And I was guilty of this too. I will just let you know that before I had my empowered births of my children, and before I got into the birth community and became a stand for true natural birth, I was the girl who would watch birth stuff on TV and say, I'm never having kids. That looks painful and horrible. And like, give me a C-section and a tummy tuck and knock me out for the whole thing. But I don't even want to get pregnant because this is terrifying. So that's the level I was at. And it's not an accident. When you are in a culture of fear, you are absorbing those messages from the time that you're a little girl all the way to when you want to become a mom. And if you don't have anybody in your family counteracting that pop culture or what you hear from other people or the education, like my daughter is very fortunate, because when we're watching TV shows together, even stuff from my own childhood or my adolescence, like there's one thing, we watch Gilmore Girls, and there's a lot of fear around birth within that. And they even ridicule home birth, and they ridicule doulas at certain points, and they ridicule midwives within that series. But it's a product of the culture, and it's a product of people basically being like, well, they don't really know much about it, because if they truly understood how beautiful and transformative true natural birth can really be, how beautiful and connected it can be to be at home birthing your baby and have your partner catch the baby, if they truly saw that, they wouldn't be saying the things that they're saying. But if you've never given birth before, you've got all of that fear. You have nothing else to go on. You're looking at other people who are telling you their horror stories, but because you have not personally experienced it and you haven't learned the way out of that fear, you're just going to think, oh my gosh, birth is horrible and painful and dangerous. And when you, empowered mom, share that you're going to have a true natural birth, they're going to look at you and they're going to be like, are you insane? Like, you don't get a trophy for a natural birth. Why would you do that to yourself? And again, I was guilty of this. So I'm just going to go back and say to that past person that I talked to, the people that I was around, and I said all of those things about how birth was painful and traumatic, and why would you hire a midwife instead of a doctor? And why wouldn't you get the epidural at 4 centimeters? And why would you plan a home birth, you crazy hippie? Like, I'm sorry. I completely apologize. If there's anybody from my past who is watching this, I completely apologize. I was in my anthropology class and I was saying horrible things because I'd learned that labor could take 3 days and I didn't have any context for that. I didn't recognize that you wouldn't be in pain the whole time. Now I'm like, oh, a 3-day labor? That's like nothing, because if it's stop and start, you get a rest. I would honestly rather have that than have it all come all at once, because it's more intense. And there's still ways around it. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe my next baby would come all like super fast. There's a dynamic to it, but I'm not afraid of birth. I used to be terrified of birth. I'm not anymore. I'm not afraid of birth. I love birth. Birth is like, it's a passion of mine. It's something that I was fascinated about when I was a kid until I got those stories. So if somebody has never given birth before and they're telling you, are you crazy? Ignore it. Okay? They don't know. And you never know. They might change their mind. They might get to be a lot older and they have a baby and they're like, oh, wow. Or maybe, I mean, biological men cannot give birth. They will never understand that. So this then leads to, if your partner is saying, I don't know, babe, I think you should just have a hospital birth and you should get the epidural, they have never given birth. They have never been pregnant. They will never give birth. They will never be pregnant. They do not understand how your body works. They do not understand anything about your experience in your body, and they don't get a say. Okay? They don't get a say. They don't get to put their fears on you. They don't get to put their hangups on you. Go watch some of my other videos on how to get your partner on board, because what you need to understand is that no, your partner doesn't get a say in this. No, your partner doesn't get to have an opinion on your birth plan. Your partner needs to be on board with your birth plan. And if they're not, after you have worked through all of the tools of the empowered birth method, if they're still resistant, you might have a category 5, in which case there's a whole other level, because you're basically working with their own selfish needs for control, and they don't care about your experience. The category 5 doesn't care about your experience. They care about their own needs and their own control and their own sense of superiority. So if you have one of those partners, you've got a bigger issue than just my partner's not on board with my home birth. Do it anyway. If you need to put safety measures in place to do it anyway, do it anyway. There is a blog post article that I read on Gloria LeMay's website, Wise Women Way of Birth, that's called Women Who Won't Go. There were husbands that were like, thank you, we won't be having a home birth. They went to work. Their wife called the midwife over. They had the home birth. There are ways, my friend, there are ways, empowered mom, for you to get the birth you want without having to fight, beg, or compromise, even when the odds look like they're stacked against you. So if somebody's never given birth before, they don't get an opinion on your birth. Number 2 on our list is those who have never had a natural birth and didn't want one. Anybody in the mom groups who has only ever had an epidural or who has only ever induced their labors or had a C-section, if you are going out into the mom groups and you're asking the question, how do I handle natural birth? Those moms sometimes swarm in and they say, oh, it's too painful, go get the epidural. Those are the moms that you don't want to listen to. Anybody who's in that space, there's a lot of people that are so traumatized or they feel like they made the wrong choice, but they haven't worked through that, and they haven't worked through their own process enough to recognize that when they're putting those opinions on you, it's not helpful. They're perpetuating their own trauma, they're perpetuating the natural birth traps, and they're perpetuating a lot of the cultural attitudes that perpetuate those natural birth traps. So anybody who has never had a natural birth, you cannot ask them questions about natural birth. They are just going to give you their experiences. Well, I wouldn't do that because this and this and this could happen. And I had this and this and this happen in my labor, and I ended up with a C-section. And if I'd had a natural birth, me and my baby would have died. If I had a home birth, me and my baby would have died. If I had said no to that test, then something bad would have happened and me and my baby would have died. They don't know that. They don't know that. Because they have never had a natural birth, because they haven't actually experienced natural birth, they don't have a frame of reference for what physiological birth actually looks like. And this is true with doctors too. If you have a female doctor or female like nurse, and you ask them, because they had kids, well, what were your births like? This is another way to skirt around their whole overall philosophy, because they can talk the talk to try to get you into the medical system and to hire them. But did they walk the walk? When I am looking at obstetricians to follow on social media, I'm looking for the ones that actually had a natural birth. When I find one that's like, oh, I had a natural birth at home, That is a bigger deal in the medical community than somebody who only ever had C-sections and thinks all births should be C-sections and you need to have the epidural and birth is painful. You don't want that one. You want the one that has actually experienced natural birth. So if they haven't, they're not the right one for you. They're not the right care provider. They're not the right friend to talk to. They're not the right family member to talk to. They've never had a natural birth. So why would you go to any of their advice or tell them about your birth plan, knowing that they don't have that experience? And they might even be like, oh, it must be nice thinking that you can have this natural birth. You know, I tried to do it and it didn't work. So don't get your hopes up. There's no trophy for a natural birth. They have to feel good about their choices. And they may have had something traumatic happen to them, but they're not aware of it. So you need to recognize fish can't see the water they swim in. And maybe they're not even doing it on purpose, but they've not had that experience. They can't help you. They're not the right support for you. They're not the right facilitators for you. And that leads into number 3 on our list, because you need to understand that there is a difference between natural birth in the medical system and our birth culture versus true natural birth, the physiological process that your body is designed to do, that's going to lead to a lot less interventions or complications, probably even no interventions. This is the true natural birth process that is less painful. You can even have an orgasmic birth, as Deborah Pascali-Bonaro and Elizabeth Davis talk about inside Orgasmic Birth. And this physiological process is going to be unique to you. So if people are thinking about natural birth, oh, I had a natural birth, did they really? Now, I'm not saying this to be cheeky, and I'm not saying this to invalidate anybody's experience, but I want to be very clear, because Rachel Reed talks about this in her book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, and a little bit inside her other book, Why Induction Matters, and on a lot of her content, that if you introduce interventions into your birth, into your pregnancy, you are no longer having a physiological birth. The second you interfere with your body's physiological process through outside interventions, your body is no longer doing its thing. You are now introducing other outside forces that can alter that process. And the more intervention that you have, the more likely that process is going to be hijacked. I can tell you right now that if you introduce an epidural, your physiological birth is gone completely, because your body's hormones are no longer there. They have been counterbalanced by the synthetic hormones inside of that substance. Same thing with Pitocin. If you break your waters, if somebody artificially breaks your waters, that is going against your body's physiological process. Even something like vaginal exams can go against your body's physiological process. Any intervention where you are inserting drugs into your body is messing with the hormone cocktail already there. And if you introduce fear, now the adrenaline and the cortisol is interfering with the oxytocin that is needed to help open up your body for birth. So you need to be very clear that there is a difference between natural birth in the medical system and our birth culture versus true natural birth. Go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide to understand more about true natural birth. I talk about the difference between true natural birth and natural birth within our birth culture and medical system as the difference between organic ice cream that you get at a dairy farm where you actually got to pet the cows and you know exactly how the milk was made. You know that there's no preservatives in it. You know that it's completely fresh. It's organic and the cows are treated humanely, versus going to the convenience store and you pick up something that you think was ice cream and you get it home because on the label, the picture looks like ice cream. And then you get it home, you look at it and it says frozen dessert. It's full of preservatives, it's full of additives, and you're like, this is not ice cream. This is chemicals. Well, the same thing is happening with natural birth in the medical system and our birth culture, is that moms say, natural birth was traumatizing to me. But then you go and you actually read the article or the blog post and you find out this mom was induced. This mom had Pitocin. This mom had an unmedicated birth, but it was not a natural birth. If you induce labor, it's not a natural birth. If you introduce interventions, it's not a natural birth. It's an unmedicated birth. And unmedicated birth absolutely is painful. I had this experience in the hospital. I was fighting for my true natural birth. And the whole time I was being interrupted. They wanted to do vaginal exams, and I said no. But recognizing that it was harder for me to stay in that flow and that process and fight off all of that medical pressure than it was to have the same physiological process at home. Because I'd gotten all those people out of my space, I blocked off my social media. I wouldn't listen to anybody who was going to try to talk me out of my home birth the second time. I didn't answer my phone. I wasn't going to absorb negative education. And my partner knew. People at his work were like, well, why don't they just induce her? Why don't they just break her water? I mean, she's been going in and out of labor now for weeks. There must be something wrong. And my partner at the time, he's like, yeah, you tell her that. Like, she's a birth advocate. He was like, I'd like to see you try to suggest that she have her waters broken. Believe me, you'll get a lecture on that. And I'm like, I honestly don't care. Like, I don't have time to educate them right now. I'm just not going to listen to any of that crap. And even my own mom, like, she was really worried about me. And she's like, well, she needs to be assessed. Let's see where she's at in her dilation. She should go to the doctor and get assessed for dilation. And like my partner at the time, he's sitting there and he's getting all these texts from her because I had turned off my phone. And he's like, you need to just tell your mom that you're okay so that she stops blowing up my phone with the text. I'm like, fine. So I did that. So if somebody has never had a true natural birth experience, like my mother had never had, like a lot of my aunts would say that birth was painful because they did it unmedicated, but they also had episiotomies. They also ended up having their waters broken. They had vaginal exams. It's not the same thing. True natural birth is your body's natural hormones, giving you those endorphins and that oxytocin. And natural birth in the medical system is painful, traumatic, and can lead to the cascade of interventions. And then you think that you weren't able to cope with it. You think you couldn't cope with the pain. You crumbled under the pressure. You got the epidural, but you don't realize that a lot of the things that are being done in the realm of natural birth, even in the natural birth communities, is perpetuating those natural birth traps. Go check out my freebie guides or go check out the deep dive on natural birth on my website, empoweringmomsbirth.com. So go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide if you want the overview of the entire empowered birth method. But if you've already gone through that and you already are familiar with that system, then the next step that you're going to want to take is to go to the freebie page and start reading all of those guides. And once you've done that, go and watch the deep dive master classes, because I'm going deep on everything you need to know to plan and get your true natural birth and avoid those natural birth traps, avoid that fear and trauma so that you don't keep taking advice that's going to lead you right back into those traps. Because a lot of the moms, even in the natural birth communities, they don't even know what true natural birth is. I'm often in these mom groups, sometimes some of the best mom groups for natural birth. And the doulas themselves understand the physiological process. The admins understand it, but the bigger a group gets, the more likely it is that it's going to have people in that group that are still following the mainstream, and you don't know what advice you're getting. So I have made it my mission. I am committed to you having a true natural birth. And I put all of this information out for you. I don't hide anything behind a paywall. The only thing I put behind a paywall is more access to me and my energy. But if you ever have any questions, all you have to do is email hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com. If you are already inside the Empowered Birth community as one of our subscribers, then I will get back to you within 1 to 2 business days. All you have to do is hit reply to any one of our weekly newsletters. So that automatically has me know, oh, you're a member of the community and your priority. If, however, you are not part of the Empowered Birth community, it usually takes about 3 to 5 business days because priority really goes first to our top level coaching clients, then to our students of our self-study program, then to Empowered Birth community subscribers, and finally to the general public. You can also drop comments, share your experience with the Empowered Birth method or experiences in giving birth or any insights you have. You can add value to the community, but if you do have a direct question that you do want to get information on right away, then the fastest way is to email, because I'm not always checking the comments right away. Sometimes when I'm putting up the videos itself, I just go and I do read them. I do read every comment and I do respond. However, it takes longer than the 3 to 5 business days if you're outside of the community and you have not emailed me directly. So I just want to let you know about that. However, no matter where you're at, you deserve to have an empowered birth. You deserve to have a true natural birth, because when you have an empowered birth, you're an empowered mom for life, and nobody can take your power away from you ever again. And as I said, if you do want to go deeper with this, I have resources on my website. You can go and read my book, Your Empowered Birth. I do have a self-study program available called Your Empowered Birth Academy, and you can learn all about that by going to empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide. Okay, so now that you know the 3 types of people that you do not want to be getting advice from or telling about your birth plans or allowing in your energy field and your space because they can affect your mindset, let's just quickly recap what they are. So number 1 is anybody who has not given birth before or will never give birth. So if they have never given birth, they don't know the experience. They only know what they've seen in the outside birth culture, and our culture is laced with fear and misinformation. There's a lot of TV shows that I sit there and I'm watching with my kids, and I'm sitting out there and screaming at the TV. That is not birth. And I'm correcting things that I hear in society and in mainstream, and I'm telling my kids over and over, remember, kids, that's not natural birth. It's been ingrained into them since they were babies. I have been a birth advocate for as long as my son has been born, because after I experienced true natural birth, and I did it within the hospital system, and I saw the uphill battle that I had to fight just to be taken seriously in my family, in my community, in the mom groups, in the medical system, I was like, people need to know about this. I got good and mad. I became a birth advocate. I learned even more. I dug deep into the rabbit hole. I started listening to the stories of midwives and doulas. I saw where their hands were tied. I understood about physiological birth. And then I basically custom crafted my own home birth experience, because I'm like, I'm never going to get tricked again. I'm never going back to the hospital again. They would have to drag me kicking and screaming. It would have to be a life or death situation. I now know what I didn't know before. Beforehand, I had planned a home birth, and I'd been saying to myself, I just will avoid the hospital system completely. And I fell into the natural birth traps that then led to me having my confidence undermined by people who had never given birth before, never had a true natural birth experience before, and never had a natural birth before. And it all just accumulated in my mindset, and I didn't yet have the tools to block that out. Now I have the tools that no matter what anybody says to me, I am confident in my truth. I am confident it's like, if this isn't true for me, if it's not right for me, I'm not going to do it. And I don't care what expert said it. If it doesn't work for me, I'm not going to do it. So I just want to be very clear for you that if you don't feel that natural birth is right for you to the point where it's like, I kind of want to do the medical thing, that's perfectly okay. You can still have an empowered birth. It won't be a true natural birth, but it will be an empowered birth. And there are pieces of the empowered birth method that will help you. However, you're going to have a more empowering experience if you know why you're calling in that medical intervention, and if you know all the risks and benefits, and you know the alternatives. Because there's a lot of moms that think, I have to go the medical route because of such and such. And then later they discover, as my friend Jenny did, well, wait a minute, if I had known that this option was available to me, or if I had known that this was a possible likelihood of what I chose, I never would have made that choice. Because she's sitting there, she was reading Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, and she's like, oh, I'm going to have a natural birth. But she had chronic high blood pressure. So then she went into the medical system and she was on a need to know basis, but the doctor felt she needed to know nothing. She got fed up. She went and hired a midwife when she was closer to the end of her pregnancy, but she didn't understand about the political dynamics of the midwife. So she's like, but I hired a midwife and then I got to the hospital and the medical system wouldn't let me call my midwife. They made me deal with this OB. And this particular OB that she had was very chauvinistic and anti-midwife. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, of course, all of this happened. And she's like, I need to learn from you. I need to take your classes. So Your Empowered Birth, the book behind me, is actually written because everything that Jenny told me, she's like, I want to learn from you. She validated my system. She didn't have to, but she validated it. And then she actually implemented it, and she had a completely hands-off vaginal birth after cesarean in the hospital in a health authority that really didn't do hands-off birth, let alone allow a VBAC, especially with Jenny's many medical conditions that she had. She had gestational diabetes, chronic high blood pressure. She had a history of postpartum preeclampsia with her first baby. She had a previous C-section. So all of these things were stacked up against her, but the empowered birth method allowed her to call in the support that she wanted and leave the rest. She knew that she wasn't feeling comfortable having a home birth. She wanted that hospital backup, but she wanted more control. And some of my clients have gone on and been like, this birth is like, this labor is getting to the point I'm exhausted. I just want to get things moving and I want to have the epidural. And they choose that knowing that there's other risks involved, but they're choosing it. They're not going in with fear. They know that's like, I've labored to a point where I feel comfortable and I feel like I've been able to take my power back, because before it was C-section after C-section and I wasn't able to go into labor on my own. They induced me. And now I was able to take my power back. But being able to recognize that is what really allows you to have that experience. Whereas a lot of moms, those who have never had a true natural birth, they're thinking in the lens of, well, natural birth is painful and something to get through, because they're being in that whole system of fear and misinformation. And those who have never had a natural birth at all are also looking at those horror stories, and they don't have a real frame of reference. And then those who've never given birth and never will give birth really don't have a frame of reference. So true natural birth is really rare in our society and our birth culture. It's not so rare in other places like Russia, where women just assume that they can give birth naturally and they don't do it with medication. In fact, Cynthia Gabriel talks about this in her book, Natural Hospital Birth, which again, you need to understand that if you're in the medical system, they have their own fears that come up. So if you do want to know more about that, if you want the deeper dive to really understand this, then I'm just going to let you know that the Empowered Birth Method is here for you, whether you work with me further or not, whether you get any of my courses. I don't put information behind a paywall. All you have to do is keep following these master classes. Definitely go and check out the Empowered Birth Starter Guide at empoweringmomsbirth.com/start guide, because that will give you the overview. I recommend that you read through that at least once. And then once you've done that, go to the different sections that are most relevant to you and click on the links that are going to be most relevant to you, because I've embedded links within this starter guide to take you deeper into the methods and pieces that you really need. But all I ask, since I'm giving you everything, is that you like, share, subscribe to this channel, pay it forward, pass this on to other moms who need it. Because if they're out there in the mom groups and they're asking for the natural birth advice, they're likely to get tricked. They're likely to lose confidence. They're likely to stay stuck. And you yourself have now been empowered moving forward. If you do need extra support, just reach out to me. hello@empoweringmomsbirth.com, and either myself or one of my team members will get back to you within 3 to 5 business days. Or if you're within the Empowered Birth community already, just hit reply to any one of the emails, and then we will get back to you within 1 to 2 business days. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Have a happy empowered birth journey, and I'll see you soon. Namaste.